Joining me to talk about the effects of California's shifting ground is my guest, Keith Meldahl, professor of geology at Maricosta College and author of the book, Surf, Sand, and Stone, How Waves, Earthquakes, and Other Forces Shape the Southern California Coast. And Keith, what's considered a small quake in California, and how many do we typically have?
We can have dozens per day. A small earthquake would be pretty much anyone that nobody would feel. We pick them up with sensitive instruments called seismographs, and they're happening all the time. It's like the earth is crackling under our feet.
In your book, Surf, Sand, and Stone, you describe that these forces shaped California's southern California's coastline, I should say. How do little quakes, are they included in that?
Yeah, they all do a part of the big work, which is really that we're sandwiched in this fault shattered zone between the Pacific plate and the North American plate. And the Pacific plate is trying to take us toward Alaska. Every little earthquake, every big earthquake, it all is part of the Pacific plate's relocation campaign for our region. We're sliding toward Alaska about 2 inches per year, and those little quakes all help us get there.
Nudge us along. I love the relocation campaign. I haven't quite heard it that. Moving up to in size when it comes to earthquakes, let's talk about the San Andreas Fault. How has the side-by-side movements of that major fault actually changed our region's geology down here?
The San Andreas is really the biggest player in this shifting game, where we have, all of Southern California is a sliced up mess of faults that start with the San Andreas and stretch west all the way across San Diego, even 100 miles out to sea. And depending where you are in that bunch of slivering faults, you're all heading basically toward the northwest. Now, the San Andreas is the one that's doing most of that moving that I was mentioning, of moving us toward Alaska. And as it tries to move, it stores up energy in the rocks bending, and eventually when those rocks can't take it anymore and they snap, that gives us a big earthquake, and that could very well happen on the southern San Andreas in the near future. And
you say near future and big, if you could qualify those for me.
Near future could be in 5 seconds or in 50 years. Is that
That's okay. 5 seconds to 50 years. And when you say big, what
more than a magnitude 7, which is a very destructive earthquake. And I say that because the other parts of the San Andreas have had magnitudes 7.8, 7.9 in historical time. Fort Tejon in 1857, San Francisco in 1906. The southernmost fault could very well do that. Again, it hasn't done it for more than 300 years, which is worrisome.
Let's talk a little bit about the surf angle of this. How do these earthquakes actually influence our surf? Does it make for bigger waves?
Well, what happens with our surf, and I have a whole chapter in the book about why surfing waves form where they do, is that when the waves come in here, if they manage to get through the gaps between the big islands offshore, they interact with the seabed in ways that pop up big waves in certain places and not in others. So if you have an area where the rocks are shallow, and maybe they've been pushed up because of earthquakes, it'll tend to focus the waves and give big surfing waves there. If you have an undersea canyon, it'll also create a situation where the waves will bend and make big surfing waves.
Let's talk about this. We recently saw a mudslide in LA from the rain, and with this year's El Nino forecast coming, what areas do you think are most at risk here in San Diego?
San Diego has a lot of steep slopes and steep mountainsides. Any steep mountainside, especially one that's burned recently, and also one that may have, and that's going to be made that much worse by the drought, because if the plants are not doing as well as they would otherwise, the roots tend to hold the soil in place. So San Diego is pretty vulnerable to big rains and mudslides. If you're near any kind of a steep slope, especially a burned one, I would say that's a place to keep an eye on.
Now, you write about coastal development and its environmental impact in relationship to all of this. Could you highlight for us what the situation is? How is, let's say, coastal homes or these retaining walls influencing the environment?
Well, I think when we meaning modern society, settled California in big numbers after World War II, we marched our homes and businesses right up to the edge of the sea, thinking that edge was somehow a stable thing. And that's an illusion that we've invested in, and we're asking for trouble as a result of that. That beautiful view that you have on the edge of the bluffs is there because of hundreds of feet of erosion. The waves have pushed the bluffs back to where they are now, and just because we've started to realize that in the last few decades doesn't mean the waves are going to stop. The rate of erosion of our bluffs here is several inches per year. And doesn't sound like much, but if you add it adds up to hundreds of feet, even over the course of recent human history. And right now, what we have is some of the most expensive real estate in the world, enjoying that ocean view, and it wants the ocean to stop doing what it's been doing to create that view in the first place. Mm-hmm. It's a losing battle. We can postpone the sea for a while, but we can't stop it.
I was going to say, a lot of cement, though, is holding that up. Doesn't that work?
It is. It will in the short term, and maybe that's enough for some people, 10 or 20 years.
All right, so much more to read about. Author Keith Meldahl, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.